Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to, oh. Lord. We're going to call the Public Policy and Finance Subcommittee together, and we're going to hear House Bill 304. You can come right here to the end, Representative Lott. Yes, ma'am. I think you're number one, right?
She is number one.
I'm number one, yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. You have the floor.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having me today. I am here to present House Bill 304, which will suspend the state collection of motor fuel taxes through May 31st of 2022 and will be effective upon the governor's signature. I am using LC 432370S. Do you, is that one that you all have? Because it's a recent. Okay.
2370, yes, correct.
Okay, great. 304 covers gasoline, diesel, aviation gasoline, liquefied petroleum gas, and special fuels such as compressed natural gas. Georgia has suspended our gas tax in the past, and it is critical that we do this again. Governor Kemp, along with the General Assembly, seek to ease the burden Georgians are feeling at the pump by suspending the state's motor fuel tax collection. The governor's office has worked with members of the House and Senate to be able to bring this bill to you today. I ask for your favorable consideration, and I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Questions of committee? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader Lott. Question, just is there a dollar amount on those figures as far as between now and the end of May, what that may look like?
There is. That's an excellent question. So we have the dollar figure is, well, for February, our tax collection was 157 million. So that's a per month. Of course, that varies just slightly each month, but somewhere between 157, maybe up to 160 per month. If the revenue estimate for this process is not met, then the state will dip into the undesignated surplus from fiscal year 2021 or the revenue shortfall reserve. So that has been worked out as well, how we would handle that shortfall.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? It is the proper time. We have a motion to move to pass. We've got a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, it moves on to full committee.
Thank you all
Representative
so
Lott.
much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And let's see, next we're moving on to House Bill 1041, LC 432188. Representative Perkle. Maybe not. It-
We've changed.
Million, and happy to answer any questions.
Cow's language on there as well.
It's simply the rural hospital tax credit bill.
I'll second the chairman motion just to help you get.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I spoke with Chairman Perkle ahead of time, and he knows what the bill is and what we're moving.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, it's in full committee. We will adjourn. I think that's all we've got in this committee today, and we have broke a record. So we will move on to the next committee, the Public Policy and Finance, whatever this committee is adjourned.
Chairman Martin's detained, I believe, in his own committee meeting right now. So I'll call the Sales Tax Subcommittee meeting of the Sales Tax Subcommittee of Ways and Means to order. And we have one bill, House Bill 1291. And Vance, it's your bill. I'm sorry. If you'll, Representative Smith, you'll present the measure, please. All right, measure, what button you? There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will be working off LC 432358S. This incentive that we're going to talk about has been around for over 20 years, and it's formerly known as and still known as a high-tech exemption. It keeps us competitive with other states. A number of companies use this exemption. It's supported by the Metro Chamber, the Georgia Chamber, the Georgia Manufacturing Association. And what it'll do, it'll keep the threshold at 15 million. We redefine the definition now is strictly hardware. It won't include items such as personal cell phones that's used by employees of the company. It exempts everything above the threshold. What'll happen is that up to the threshold, they'll pay 10% sales tax that'll go to the correct authorities. And then everything above 15 million, if they spend 15 million, will be exempt. Currently, we have an exemption sunset till December 31st, 2023. That was Representative Martin's bill. This will start January 1, 2024. So it'll allow the companies and DOR to be able to handle this and implement this. And as I stated, software is not eligible. So I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you have. I will say there's a company, and I know in my own area that uses this. A lot of employees from Harris County, my constituents, work at this homegrown company, and it has been very beneficial to them to keep them in our area. So be happy to answer any questions.
I've got Chairman Rich, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Representative Smith. In seeing the bills, I'm kind of new here, but in seeing the bills that have come through Ways and Means, I noticed that the sunsets are typically 5 years, and this one is, I guess it's giving a 12 years. It's 10, I guess it expires in 23, and this extends it to 33. Is there a reason that there's such a long sunset on this?
It's actually going to 2028.
You have the right LC number.
I may not. I thought it went to.
It's LC 43 2 right here, 2358S.
Okay, all right. Okay,
You might have to refresh your name.
okay, all right.
You know how to do it.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay, so it's not 10 years. It is a little bit longer though than the typical sunset. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I think it may be longer than some, but it's maybe shorter than others. I think, there's a variety of sunsets. They're not all standard, but this 2028 puts it standard with a sunset that's out there now with the data centers. There's sunsets in 2028. So if I think I'm correct, and I can stand to be corrected, it puts those at the same year.
I see.
Yeah, excuse me. It wouldn't look like.
The 68 code section would essentially put all that in on par and create some parity there, because the existing sunset on the other provision is 28. This would provide that same sunset year.
You have a follow-up question, Chairman Rich?
No.
Okay.
It ends in.
All right. What? Chairman Houston, do you have a question?
Well, I just, was looking at the fiscal note.
So as I read go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jim.
So as I read the bill from the first, as opposed, as Chairman Rich just pointed out, the committee substitute is going to reduce the period of time for the sunset by 5 years, having expired December the 31st, 2023. But unlike the current structure of this, you tighten it up to just hardware spend, which effectively is raising the capital expenditure spend portion on this, frankly, from about 5 million to 15 million, as I understand the current structure. It will also collect taxes on a portion of that initial 15 million spend, which is not being collected today. So it's going to increase. So it's much more conservative presentation than the measure that's currently on the books today. So as I understand.
If I'm looking at the fiscal note
What microphone?
7,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, it just goes back, this just goes back to, let's say 2027. If you add, and I said 89 million and state tax and 74 million in local tax, that comes out to more than they spend. Didn't that spend 15 million?
Questions?
I don't get that.
I wonder too, because this bill only applies to hardware. It doesn't apply to software.
Okay.
So I can't state whether or not that fiscal
So
note,
the property has to be more than 15 million. How many people are doing this?
I think it's around 30, 32.
32.
Chairman Blackman wants to weigh in on this. Chairman Blackman.
I'm told by DOR that Ms. One Acre is on Zoom with us here, and that she may have what the current fiscal impact is. And then, of course, we've adjusted from this fiscal note. You'll notice the LC is different. So the bill, the substitute in front of you that Representative Smith has is actually a significant reduction over even what that fiscal note says, but even far and beyond what the current exemption is worth. And I wonder if she might be able to share with us what we're at now, and that might help Chair Lady Houston.
And is there a cap on it?
Well, I've asked her a question.
So we want to recognize, and your intent is to have Department of Revenue.
If
answer the
if
question?
DOR could answer that, I believe Ms. One Acre's on Zoom.
How do I do that? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I am on Zoom. Thank you. I can confirm that the number that was mentioned for the approximate number of exemption entities taking the exemption is around 30 to 32. I do not have the information regarding the current physical cost, though. There was a bill that passed last year that put forth a reporting requirement where companies availing themselves to this exemption had to submit to us a report outlining the amount of tax exempted in the prior year. But those reports aren't even due until March 31st of this year. We've only received a couple of them thus far. So I don't have any kind of accurate figure regarding the current physical cost.
So the estimate that I recall from last year would not have come from you?
I apologize. I am not familiar with the estimate that you're referencing. So I'm not sure that it did come from me.
Understood. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Chairman Carpenter.
So if we look at it and we look at these estimated state revenues on the fiscal note, what you can probably do is add those two numbers together, and then you can, it looks to me if we got 32 companies, you're looking at $3.3 million in revenue that we aren't currently collecting, that we're going to collect with this 10% rule. So whatever those numbers add up to on each year, and then take that $3.3 million that we will be collecting, that will be split between the state and the local, if that helps anybody. It's just it sets, you're gonna, so if there's $15 million, we're gonna collect the sales tax is owed on that $15 million. We're gonna cap it at 10%. It's what I say.
And then everything, and when they hit the 15 million, everything over that will be exempt. And that's new because we'll be actually bringing money into the state.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any further questions from members of the committee? Do we have anybody signed up to speak on the bill? Sorry. Is anybody in the crowd prepared to speak for or against the measure? No one feels passionate about this measure? Anyone want to speak for or against it? They have seated.
This one.
Lana, if you'll tell everyone who you are and for whom you work, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Leanna Brown with the Metro Atlanta Chamber. We addressed this committee a few weeks ago on the same topic, so I'll keep it very brief today. This is a very important incentive for our members, not just members of the Metro Atlanta Chamber, but businesses all across the state. We have a number of trade organizations that support this bill, including the Metro Atlanta Chamber, Georgia Chamber of Commerce, the Technology Association of Georgia, Georgia Manufacturers Association, and others. This is really a bill that, an incentive that really paved the way a number of years ago to help with this high technology investment in our state. And it has been an important tool ever since to both recruit companies and to retain companies and ensure that they continue making that investment here. And we're talking about companies that are not necessarily these big tech companies, but they are companies that leverage technology, which is necessary to the way that we operate in a modern environment. So we're talking about companies like UPS and the Home Depot and Global Payments. So we just appreciate this committee's consideration of this bill, which will help us remain competitive. Without it, our state is truly at a competitive disadvantage.
Are any questions of the witness by the members of the committee? Hearing none, no one's online to speak for or against it. Hearing none, what's the will of the committee? Have a move do pass in a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously, and it's on to the big committee. So this Sales Tax Committee of the Ways and Means Committee stands adjourned. And I'm sorry. Did you say something? So now we'll call the Income Tax Subcommittee of Ways and Means. So again, Chairman Blackman's got to go on to another meeting to present a bill. So I will chair this Income Tax Subcommittee. And our first measure today is House Bill 1053. And get that in front of me.
Houston and I are about to go to election integrity, but do you need one of us to stay for?
Probably wouldn't. Well, I think we got plenty. We got a
You
plenty.
okay?
Yeah, if y'all got to go to that. All right.
This is the only part of tax that I really have a lot of knowledge on. That, so I
Okay.
hate to-
Chairman Stevens, you ready to present the bill?
Make a motion, if you will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of committee. House Bill 1053, LC number 432369S is the post-production bill that we have talked about a bit. This entire industry for post-production, we essentially stole from California after 2008, whenever we did the original film tax credit bill. This came along later under Governor Deal to get this entire industry here in Georgia from the get-go, if you will. It's gone over, this bill's gone over revisions and reductions from the committee, very good ones, I might add. The bill has a $10 million cap. And the bill limits that $10 million to no more than $2 million per company. We have also addressed the issue of, and of course it expires in 2028. The biggest issue that we dealt with recently had to do with tax credit carry forwards. We limit that from 5 years to 3 years. And Mr. Chairman, that is the extent of the bill, and I would ask for your favorable consideration.
Mr. Chairman, would you want to address the lines 16 through 20 and, section 2 about income taxes? Am I reading the correct substitute?
Yes, this makes sure that we capture those people that are in the state of Georgia that pay income tax for this particular tax credit that we're capturing all those dollars. That's a big deal.
Chairman Carpenter, I know you've had your a lot of input on this. Would you help?
Yep, absolutely. So, the other day we presented this in committee and we had the wrong wording. So we just clarifying. Basically what we're attempting to do is that anybody that is utilizing the film tax credit, not just this post-production piece, but the entire film tax credit, any residuals paid to individuals, whether they live in Georgia or not in Georgia, moving forward, such as royalties, would be taxable in the state of Georgia. And that's basically making sure we're being good stewards of the taxpayers' money, and as much revenue as we can carve back from those profits, we're able to do so. So if let's, for instance, Disney makes Black Widow, the movie. All right, there's $100 million worth of royalties that come out of that movie, and it's filmed in the state of Georgia. Those royalties that go to the producer, director, actor would then be taxable in the state of Georgia. Much no different than if I'm in construction and I go to Alabama and I do a construction job, right? I have to pay taxes in Alabama. This would be the same way. The work was done in the state of Georgia, and therefore it should be taxable in the state of Georgia. And that's what this does. There is a piece that we need to address on lines 20, 32, and 45. We need to remove the letter A at the end of that. Or add the exact same section, but just do 40-20.26. Does that make sense? Because this would just apply to the post-production piece of it, and we want it to apply to all productions. And so if we're gonna, and that's that, and it's, sorry, I apologize. It just came up to me, but we want to make sure that this does capture all productions in the state of Georgia, not just the post-production piece, but the actual entire production. And I apologize. It got thrown at me.
Is legislative counsel in here? I'm sorry. Okay. So my question was, is legislative counsel in here just to confirm the intent? Here we go. Come on in, Blake. So, did you have a question? Joe, I don't understand what you just said. All right. So, Chairman Stevens, what button are you at? All right. Chairman
Mr.
Stevens.
Chairman, if I may, as Ledge Council's coming up here, this ought to be with the way we do all of our bills that we're giving tax incentives for. And it's something that we have not done over a period of years. And to Chairman Houston, that this is exactly, I think, where we all need to be going in Ways and Means, so that whenever we give a tax incentive, the state of Georgia taxpayer rides along with their success, if you will. So if they succeed, we succeed, and then the taxpayers get that much more back. So this is an attempt to try, for the first time that I can remember, to try to let the state of Georgia ride along with the success of those industries that we're giving incentives for.
Thank you, Chairman Stevens. I'll recognize Chairman Houston.
I think that was me.
Okay, I'm sorry. Chairman, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, which are the lines, Chairman Carpenter, which are the lines that actually make it address royalties, and how do you handle it when something's filmed in multiple areas? Some in New Zealand, some in Georgia, some in North Carolina or somewhere. Chairman Carpenter is tied up.
Casey, did you hear that?
It-
So
it-
Dr. Newton's asking you a question.
I'm just trying to find out, when you say it applies newly to royalties, how do they address those, I guess, through regulation, to get to royalties, for one question. And then the second part is what do you do when it's filmed in 3 areas?
That's right. So it's pro rata, if you will. So if it's-
Somebody
yeah,
decides.
accountants, they have to do this all the time. They have to do 10, 25% filmed here, 25% filmed in Michigan and 25% in North Carolina,
And so
whatever.
for-
So they would do that they would have to do that 25% multiplier, if you will. And so the Department of Revenue, because of Matt Dollar's bill, the audit bill from a couple of years ago or last year, they get all this information of everybody that's working on that film. So there is a mechanism for those to track all that stuff.
And the royalties would be divided.
Right.
the
So
same
if,
way.
Scarlett Johansson gets $100 million, they should have her information and be able to track her down. Does that make sense?
So it's a portion of.
It's a
just
direct portion of what she did. So if, at the end of the film, if they say that they put a number on it, right? 30% was in Georgia, 60% was in Las Vegas, 10% in LA. That 30% she would only be liable in the state of Georgia for that 30%. So I'm sure it's based on total production spend. So if there's $1 million in Georgia, $1 million in LA, and $1 million in Las Vegas, it'd be a third.
Any follow-up questions, Dr. Newton?
If you don't mind,
Yeah.
Chairman. So we will start capturing as income royalties, even if someone, have so many people live in Florida or Tennessee because of no state income tax,
That's right.
but in particular to protect their royalties or endorsements or whatever. I guess royalties are different, but
Right.
you're saying that we'll begin to actually collect income tax on it. Obviously, they get a tax credit for what they spent too. But
Right. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, we'll be able to capture that income because it was filmed, the work was done in Georgia. And so that's the justification piece, is the work was done in Georgia.
And DOR might need to confirm, but what I understand you saying is the first time ever, is Chairman Stevens said, the taxpayer gets a return on this credit that the state of Georgia has been giving this industry. And even if they live in California, they pay Georgia income taxes up at our rate, and then they could get a credit from California for the balance they might owe California, which it will definitely owe more in California.
That's
Is that-
right.
Is that
Yeah.
correct?
So it shouldn't cost them. I mean, if they live in Florida, obviously it will cost them some money that they didn't owe, but if they live in California, the money they pay us will come off their California return.
Chairman Stevens, you have any?
Just one more thing on following up on Dr. Newton's question, that to even qualify for the credit, the majority of the film has to be, and it's up there. I'm trying to remember, it's like 90% has to be filmed in Georgia anyway, even to qualify for the credit. So before you even get there, but that pro rata portion would go back to follow up with Representative Carpenter. But before you even get there to qualify for the credit, it's got to be filmed lensed, as they call it, in Georgia.
Thank you for that clarification, Chairman. Does any other members of the committee have questions for Chairman Smith for presenting the bill? I'm sorry, Chairman Stevens for presenting the bill. So Chairman Newton asked the question whether or not DOR is online, whether or not they can weigh in and explain whether or not we're interpreting this correctly.
new income tax on royalty.
Well, you phrased the question. Is DOR online? Is the Department of Revenue representative still online?
Mr. Chairman, I'm online.
Okay,
This is
Chairman
Stephen Vaughn,
Newton.
Georgia Department of Revenue.
yeah. Chairman Newton has a question for you, please.
Thank you, and appreciate you being on. I know Chairman Stevens mentioned it, as well as the author. It says that we may be we start collecting income tax on royalties because of the description in this bill? Is that new? Is that really covered in this bill? Or does that require additional separate legislation?
I believe the way it's characterized in the bill is new from what we're probably doing right now. It is a new concept in the law. I can confirm that. And I think we would follow traditional income and reporting requirements based on whether somebody is subject to tax in Georgia. There are rules for residents and for taxable non-residents. I think Chairman Martin mentioned something along those lines in the last committee meeting about how we apportion income in Georgia to taxable non-residents. This does sound a little unique in that it's taxed to a greater extent in Georgia than a taxable non-resident would be under current law. So if that answers your question, I think this does expand it a little bit.
This would be line 16, if you mind, 16 through 20, I guess, is the particular part you're saying that is, or is it 29 through 33 that brings in for the first time apportionment of royalties?
Are you on? I apologize. So the version online that I'm looking at doesn't have that language. I might be looking at the wrong place. So you're asking about, are you asking just generally about how income is apportioned in Georgia now to a taxable non-resident versus the language in the bill?
Yes, yeah. And we're in 2369S.
So we're looking, you might want to refresh your screen if you're looking online. We're on LC 432369S by committee substitute.
Bear with me 1 minute, I apologize.
Well, legislative council's here, Chairman Newton, maybe they can answer your question.
Sorry, let me hit mine again.
Do my best. It's over in Senate Finance. Sorry, I getting here a little late. So the question is about how income is kind of apportioned to a non-resident taxpayer. So in generally, it's based on where the work is performed. And in this case, it is a novel concept that I wasn't very familiar with because we don't handle this in Georgia, but of taxing kind of the residual payments. So payments they're getting, based on work that was performed in Georgia, but they're getting it years from now while they're living in another state. So you asked about, so there's three pieces in here. One is the definition of taxable non-resident. And I believe under the current law, taxable, we need to make this change to the definition of taxable non-resident to pull in these folks with respect to the tax credit. And then the same thing for the corporate, and that's in 48731. So yeah, the whole goal of this is to pull in non-resident or foreign corporations for taxation in Georgia. So it's kind of like marketplace facilitator where you're taxing people that traditionally don't have a nexus in Georgia through a different mechanism. So
Representative Fry. Oh, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like the concept of this. Don't want to throw any hurdles down, but I'd really like to ask DOR or legislative council. It's like, what is our, you record a record here in Georgia. And then we're not saying that, I don't think we're saying that you have to get the tax credit to be taxed perpetually on your royalties here. And so what we're doing is if you record a record in Georgia and it turns out to be a hit record somewhere else, do we even have a mechanism to track down Milli Vanilli, for lack of a better example? And I know how old y'all are by everybody who laughed and who didn't. Do we have a mechanism in which we would actually be able to track those folks and figure that out? And I don't think we really
Well,
do.
if you look at lines 30 and 31, in 31, it says with respect to a state certified production is defined in code section 48.740.26A. So it's limited to these state certified productions.
Thank you for that clarification.
But
I
it's-
stand corrected, but I still, the collection aspect of it, I feel like there's a lot more here to unpack than just a casual Ways and Means Subcommittee,
it's-
which it's not casual really, but we take it all seriously. But it's a little bigger than I think we can bite off right now. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Representative Holcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question in terms of whether or not we think that there will be a negative effect in terms of productions overall, in terms of the actors and the talent not wanting to have this tax burden. Has there been any discussion or consideration about that?
That's what we're doing right now. And there's members in the audience, I believe, will be able to help answer some of those questions. But as I understand it, the income tax is going to be due somewhere where they reside, with the exception of the zero income tax states. So for example, if it is California, where the state income tax is, let's say 10%, that most states will give an offsetting credit. So if we collect our portion of the tax here, just round number, say 5%, then they'd get a 5% credit in California to pay the rest of it. So theoretically, it should not cost that performing art star anymore unless they live in a zero income tax state.
Okay.
That's my understanding. And if the Department of Revenue wants to weigh in on whether or not my understanding is correct or not, I'd love to hear it, or anyone else. All right, so I've got a lot of lights blinking right now. So I'm going to go back to who's 3? Chairman Carpenter.
So just for clarification for Representative Holcomb, these conversations took place with people in the industry to make sure that this was a measured step that wasn't going to scare the industry, but actually was something that was reasonable for the state of Georgia to ask for in the process. Obviously, the film tax credit can be a hot ticket item for a lot of people. And I think as we go back to our home counties, we're able to say, look, you may not like the film tax credit, but I tell you what we have done is we put guardrails to make sure Georgians are getting some of the big piece of the pie at the end of the day. And I think that will help all of us as we go to sell not only because people can't wrap their head around the magnitude of this industry if it's not in your hometown. If you don't have it going on in Dalton, Georgia, we make carpet. We don't have film studios. But if you drive down to Fayetteville and you see the magnitude and the economic development, it's hard for me to show my people that. But if I can say, I tell you what we are going to do is we're going to do everything we can to make sure we're getting as a piece of the pie at the end, some of the upside of the film. And the industry took that information and said it was reasonable, said it was not going to deter investment in the state of Georgia. And so that's how we got here.
Chairman Martin, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is I guess question to the attorney revenue. And again, just as we move forward, because I know the late date we need to move, the perfection can continue. But is there issues here, or could we put a belt and suspenders around this? Because I see somewhere down the road somebody challenging this. If the residuals on these films and you know, whether it be films or music, if it's passed over, somebody buys a library and, you know, later on they come back and will like, you know, I'm not going to submit to that, or you sell it to an international firm who won't submit to that. Would it not be reasonable, and can it be done legally, that you a bit like when you're asking for a zoning, you can't do certain conditions. The government can't put those on you, but if you accept those conditions in order to get your zoning, you agree to them and you're locked in. It would seem prudent that if we're doing this to avoid costly litigation on both parties' part later on down the years, that by accepting the credit, you're agreeing to this taxation from now and forevermore. I don't know how to write that into the law, but you then, as we move forward again, Chairman Williams, I don't want to slow it down today, but is that something I would ask Director Revenue? Is that something that would give us a better feeling that we wouldn't find ourselves in litigation, 10, 20 years from now, if these libraries had changed hands a couple of times and somebody had bought it and thought they weren't subject to, and maybe even weren't a U.S. company and claim that they weren't subject to? Would that help? Would that be something to look at?
So before I recognize a legislative council, what I hear you saying just then is we have it in code, but somehow it'll be contractual before the credits are given. It'll be a contractual language in the credit.
Not just the law requiring you agree to it by taking the credit. You agree this is.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes, but what you said, it was, we can pass a law, but you can always challenge the law. If we put in there by taking the credit, you agree to this, it would seem to move a hurdle that might exist if somebody came along later that wasn't party to the original agreement.
So we have it in code and then have it contractually somehow between the state and the recipient of the tax credit, so it moved forward.
Just have it in code that
that's
by
a good
taking
idea.
this, you agree, if you take part A, you agree to part B.
Let's let legislative council speak.
I believe I'd had some language like that in a different version of the bill. So yeah, I think that's a good way to approach it, that if you want to take advantage and take the benefit of this, this credit, then that's kind of the terms and conditions. So I think one of the things here I've been learning about the industry, it's not something I'm that familiar with, but they use loan out companies typically to kind of run these businesses. So the whole production will have a loan out company that goes away when the production goes away. And any money that's paid out of the loan out companies, I believe the state already requires them to hold on to. So kind of like our withholding for when your employer pays you, we have withholding for when the loan out companies pay their talent and whatnot. So I think the issue came up not as much related to the withholding there with the loan out companies, but the money that's being paid and the contracts that's coming from much later. So after those loan out companies are gone, shut down, paid out all their funds. So.
Thank you, Blake. I understand that Representative Fry, you have a follow-up question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just curious, does anybody, maybe somebody in the audience can answer, do we have an example of a state that already does a clawback on royalties anywhere?
Well, we're going to get to the chance for the audience to answer in just a minute, but I just want to make sure we have all our questions answered up here.
Sure. And sorry, Mr.
Yes,
Chair. I
but
didn't mean to
it's a
jump
good,
ahead.
just, we need to head that way.
The issue that Michigan had some language, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, so yeah, there was some language in Michigan. Obviously, Michigan went on to ruin their film tax credit, but this piece was actually, sometimes you find strength in losers too. I'm sorry, Michigan, if you're from Michigan, but sometimes your opponents, you may beat them in the game, but they might have run a good play and you run it later. And so this was a piece that came out of Michigan.
I think it'd be a good time for any members of the audience who want to speak for or against the bill. I'm glad I don't have the microphone on you, Chairman Martin. Does anybody in the audience want to speak to the bill? Yeah, sit down and let's turn the mic on for you, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Skin Edge representing Water Media. We totally support the bill. It's been, since it was passed almost 5 years ago, we think it's greatly added to the ecosystem we're trying to create here in the state of Georgia, first by film production and now by post-production. We've seen literally hundreds, if not thousands of jobs created, good paying jobs for Georgia citizens. The post-production jobs are here 24/7, 365 days a year. They're not where they come in and make a film and then leave. These people work here, live here, pay taxes here, contribute to our economy, and contribute in a lot of ways to the state of Georgia. So we think it's been a very good tax credit, and this bill simply seeks to extend it for 5 years. There are no changes from what we did 5 years ago at all. The cap remains the same, all of that. With regard to the question about will this chill production, I've had no concern expressed on that whatsoever from my client. I've also been in communication. I can't speak for them directly, but in talking with the other people who represent the studios and various aspects of this business, I've not heard from anyone that that is a concern. So we don't see that as being a problem. So I would commend the bill to you and urge your support.
Do any members of the committee have any questions at all for Mr. Edge? Chairman House.
I just want to thank Representative Carpenter for bringing us this bill.
That's actually Chairman
Excuse me.
But she likes your handiwork on it.
Oh, well, you're just a pigeon.
Chairman House, I would point out that this bill actually first went through Chairman Carpenter's committee,
I thought it did.
received an unanimous and enthusiastic vote of support, and now it's in this committee. So it's been vetted pretty well.
Another thing, I just want, so tagging on what Representative Martin said, and the expression I'm getting from the representative across the hall, I just want everything to be great. So, I mean, so we don't get sued and everything.
Thank you, Chairman Houston. So I will, is there any further questions for Chairman Stevens?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind everybody that this is the first time we've gone down this path where we can ride along as a state for these credits. And I think it's a good path. We can go the way of Louisiana and North Carolina and on and on and on, Michigan and all those others that decided to take a different path and kill the goose that laid the golden egg, if you will. And this thing has been a $7 billion industry. We've gotten folks that have that are generating jobs and generating interest in the tourism side that hadn't even brought. And this is just a small piece of that that mountain that we have built since 2008 and 2017. And for the first time, this committee is hearing something that allows the taxpayers of Georgia to ride along with the success of these companies. And we should not be capping success, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very good opportunity for us to do something for the taxpayers of Georgia and ride along for the investment that we've made.
And I want to clarify, when you say right along, that means the income taxes, regardless of where the talent or the owners of the property live, will be paid in the state of Georgia. Any further questions by members of the committee? Hearing none, what's the will of the committee? Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye. All in favor, opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously, and congratulations, Chairman Stevens. Your measure passes, moves on to full committee.
Thanks, sir.
Next, I'd like to call up House Bill 1330. Soon to be Ambassador Smyrie, if you'll come present your measure.
I got it now. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And of course, we had a hearing on 1330, and I explained it to you in my interest in it. Of course, it's the Music and Theater Jobs of Recovery Act, and explained to you in regards to sustaining and retaining music and theater jobs in the state, and helping the lower tier cities throughout the state as it relates to performances and providing the tax credit, lowering the threshold. But the chairman and I, Chairman Blackman and you and I have discussed, and he had a substitute that changed the original bill that I brought before your subcommittee, and it is LC 432364S. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
That's the measure we're hearing today.
And what that did in our discussion, it dealt with the section that we had dealing with transferability. That was removed as it relates to transferring the tax credit for within that period of time and not allowing within the 3-year period for the tax credit to be sold or transferable. So that was taken out, and that's the extent of it.
And correct me if I'm not wrong, that was the income tax language similar to what we just discussed?
That is
and
correct.
the other bill was added to this bill as well.
That is correct.
It was
On
well.
residual payments, that the chairman is correct. Those are the two areas. Apologize for that. Dealing with royalties and residual payments.
So
And that's it.
members of the committee-
On page 2, line 29, making the residual payments as a taxable income. And the discussion that y'all just had was really an enlightening for me to hear that discussion as well.
Chairman Carpenter, you've become our new expert on residual income. If you had a chance to review this?
Yeah, I have. I've looked through it. And yeah, I mean, it captures what we're trying to do as a committee to make sure that we're tapping into this moving forward. I'm not sure if there's going to be a lot of residual on musical theatric performances, because I feel like, you know, that's going to be basically the big show practicing to go live. I'm not sure. I'm sure they will have to claim when they go to other states. You know, there's just not a lot. It's not like they're going to film it one time and then those residuals would come back to Georgia. They're going to perform, let's say, in Columbus, and then they're going to go to Nashville and to Washington, D.C., New York. And so there won't be near the residual that we see in the film tax credit piece. But that does capture, I mean, the language is correct that it captures that piece if there is any. But at the end of the day, I mean, we're adding that piece, and you've got the you're lowering, right? You're lowering the aggregate amounts on it, and then doing a little
Stripping
bit of
the
extension.
transferability.
That's right. And then you're doing a little bit of extension. You're taking it back down to 5 and then going to 10 to 15 at the end of the day. So it's not it's capped. So it's not a huge number. So whatever obviously the will of the committee, but as far as my piece that I've been working on, it's in the language.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Here none. What's the will of the committee? Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just a quick, is there anybody here from Live Nation today? Is Live Nation here today? Because I sat in another committee and they stood up and talked about how much they were for the artist and for music productions. And I noticed when we give a $15 million tax credit to live music performances, they're not in the room. So.
Well, I'm not with Live.
No, I know you're not. I know you're not in Live.
I'm with the Columbus River Center. Let me just say.
No, I understand. I'm just a little bit surprised,
Oh,
you know, when
yeah.
if you're always standing up for musicians,
Yeah,
that you wouldn't be here when we're giving away $15 million.
I knew that was coming from.
All right,
so
I'm
I
losing
wanted-
control.
That's right.
Thank you, Chairman Carpenter. But we do have a motion and a second on the table, but you did bring up a good point. I didn't allow any members from the audience to speak for or against the measure. Is anyone here prepared to do that? Nobody cares about this bill? All right. All right. Have a seat and identify yourself and tell who you work for.
To do so. Okay.
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Brian Hudson, and I do not represent Live Nation. So I'm here on behalf of Georgia Music Partners and also the Recording Academy, which is the Grammys. And obviously, thanks to Dean Smyer for his leadership and obviously for his many years of service. I just want to say we fully support this bill. We think it's a good step moving forward. Obviously, we respect the committee's decision on the transferability piece. That is something we still feel is important, but obviously respect the committee's decision on that piece. But to Representative Carpenter's amendment, adding the residuals, we certainly support the concept on royalties. And to your point, Representative Chairman Carpenter, you're right on the as it relates to rehearsals. There's really not royalties there, but on the recorded music, that's certainly a big piece of that, similar to film. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So do I understand you say then if it's a large scale production and a producer recorded the entire concert and then sold that, that royalties would be due on that, and then the state of Georgia could participate in the income taxes?
Mr. Chairman, it would
Scenario
mostly
like that.
apply to records.
Right.
And there's also a piece in here in Dean Smyer's bill that relates to recorded music being synchronized up with a film. And that would be subject to it as well, as it relates to royalties with those musical recordings versus live performances. That's a whole different world on that.
Thank you for that clarification. Again, is there any questions for the gentleman testifying? Hearing none, we got a motion.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. If there's no further discussion, what's all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries unanimously. Congratulations, Mr. Ambassador. I'm sorry, and this Income Tax Subcommittee is adjourned. There's no further business today. Thank you.